So, oh yeah. So welcome everyone for this fourth segment. I'm trying to use a different word every time of our IQS seminar. Today we are very honored, I am at least, to have Nadja Bernardis. Nadja is a good friend, and she did her PhD in the Max Planck Institute for Science of the Light, and then a postdoc in our group in Minas Gerais. She is from Minas Gerais, and Light, and then a long postdoc there, and then now she's a adjunct professor. This job position is difficult to translate, in the Federal University of Pernambuco in Recife, Brazil. She has experience. She is the general secretary of the Brazilian Society for Physics, and she has.
Not anymore.
Oh, your CV is outdated.
Yeah, sorry.
You have to update it accordingly. But she used to be.
But this is the first month. Yeah.
Yeah, she used to be then. She works with quantum optics, quantum information, more specifically with quantum Markovianity, and my readings now is that she's kind of moving or transitioning to quantum computation, right? So Nadja, floor is all yours. You have 50 minutes, 1 hour-ish, and thank you again.
Okay, great. So let me just share my presentation. No. Okay. Oops. Hi.
Yeah, I think you're studying
Okay.
SVT positions, which is good. It's not something like very embarrassing.
Sorry.
Of course.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
now you're seeing it.
Yeah.
Okay, this can move here. Yeah. So, sorry. First, I'd like to thank for the invitation to present this work today here. And I will be talking about this strategy that we have developed to simulate open quantum systems dynamics. So as Cristiano said, like my main interest is always open quantum system dynamics, no Markovianity. But then in the last years, I started to collaborate with the people from quantum computation science department. And we started to try to find some common interests. So that's why today I will be presenting something about simulating open quantum systems dynamics. And then I'm thinking really about implementing this in a quantum computer. So we have we put these results in archiving on May, but we still haven't published yet. Okay. This was a work that I did together with Kyle, which was my master's student. Now he has finished already. Pedro, which is my PhD student, and in collaboration with Adenilton Silva, which is a professor in the computer science department, and Thiago, which is his PhD student. And I like to motivate a little bit why I think it's interesting to study open quantum systems and open quantum system dynamics. So if we just look to the Sycamore processor, and we see here a processor that has a size of 10 millimeters. And for this processor to work, it is contained in this big room full of electronics, and the temperature has to be very good controlled, and many other degrees of freedom. So we see that for this processor to really work, I really need a very good control of I would say the lab and all the conditions where this processor is contained. So at the end, if we are thinking about using quantum systems for quantum information processing, we cannot talk about it thinking it as a closed system. We always will have this interaction with the environment, and we will have to think what we will do with this interaction with the environment. Okay? So as a general picture, I always have my system, which is the part that I have interested, and is the part where I have control. And I have another part that, okay, it can be that it's just the room where my processor is inside, or it's just some other system that I don't have control of, whatever. Okay, it can be classical, can be quantum. So, but when I'm saying system is this part that I know and that I control. When I say environment, is the rest. So why I think the study of open quantum systems, they are interesting. One perspective is that I can see this transition from quantum to classical. We know that is one way to describe it is through these decoherence processes, and I will be losing decoherence, I will be losing coherence, I will be losing entanglement. And so this is one perspective, which is not really my interest. My interest is more about I will be able to describe, understand, control, and possibly avoid damaging effects caused by the environment. So one way to see it is that first I will have to be able to describe this interaction, which is not necessarily trivial. The other thing is that maybe I will be able to do something with these dynamics. Imagine when you have these non-Markovian effects. So one thing that we like to explore is these non-Markovian effects for quantum information processing. So how can I use really non-Markovianity kind of a resource, which is not the topic today, but it's one of my areas of interest. But I think there is also a perspective of using this interaction with the environment in our favor. So this is what people are doing with this dissipative quantum computation. Okay, so we can start seeing the environment in a way, in a different way, and I think this is what is interesting. So how can then we describe? There are many different ways to describe open quantum system dynamics. If you just think about closed system, we have Schrodinger's equation. But if we go to an open system, one way to describing is using the maps. So the map is a quantity that will be taking my initial state to a final state, in the case here, rho S and rho ST. And to guarantee that I'm taking density operators into density operators, I request that this map preserves positivity and the trace. So I go a little bit further, which is asking this map to be not only preserve positivity, to be completely positive. And what does this mean? Is that if I have my system entangled with some other part or entangled with some other part, and I'm acting with my map in my system, I want to guarantee that, okay, I'm not doing anything with this part, but even so, the whole density operator is still, I'm taking the whole density operator into a density operator. So I'm asking that this phi t tensor identity is a positive map, then I will say that phi t is completely positive. So I will be always talking about completely positive and trace preserving map, which I will be saying CPTP, CPTP, CPTP. So these are the maps, okay? Another thing that I can show is that all CPT maps, they have this Krauss representation. So they can be represented by operators. And the only thing that these operators they have to fulfill is that the sum of n daga k and k has to go to the identity. And one important thing here is that the Krauss operators are not necessarily unitaries. And this is a problem when I want to implement or simulate the dynamics of open quantum systems in quantum computers, because usually quantum computers, they just have unitary gates, okay? So then our question at the beginning was how to efficiently simulate open quantum systems in NISQ devices. And this is important because it makes a big difference when I'm talking about NISQ devices. So I have to think that I have some limitation. Either I have a limitation of qubits, how many qubits I have in my quantum computer, or how many gates I can implement, okay? Or how big is the error of these gates? So this was our question. We want to think like in practice, what is a strategy that makes sense? So just to give you an idea how just thinking representing channels in different ways or different circuits will make an impact, a different impact when I'm implementing it in a quantum computer. I have here the depolarizing map. I'm just thinking about a qubit, okay? The depolarizing map for one qubit. So the depolarizing map is just doing the following. With some probability, I'm not doing anything with my system. And with the complementary probability, it's going to the identity. So I can represent this channel, the depolarizing channel, through these cross operators, okay? And then, okay, this is what I want to show you. This effect of different representations can, the costs for the quantum computation will be different. So one way to represent the depolarizing map, so here I'm just representing it using the cross operators, is I have my initial state, and I can use two other auxiliary systems, two other qubits, which will be prepared in this state here. And I will implement then a conditional X operation, which is a C naught, conditional not. And I will implement a conditional Y operation, okay? So every time the third qubit is prepared in state 1, then the first qubit will undergo a X operation. And every time the second qubit is prepared in qubit 1, then the first qubit will undergo Y operation, okay? So we will see here that because I have chosen the probabilities like this is exactly reproducing. So if I just trace out the degrees of freedom of the second and the third qubit, I will just have this map in the first qubit. Here I have X and Y, but you know the combination of X and Y, they are proportional to Z. So I will have Z also, okay? When I have 1, 1, and I'm acting with the 2 gates. Nice, okay, it's very simple. Another way to represent the depolarizing map, and if you go to the Nielsen and Schwang, this is how Nielsen and Schwang, they are presenting how the depolarizing map is implemented in a quantum computer. Is I told you, okay, the depolarizing map is doing like with some probability, nothing happens. With the complementary probability, I have identity. So I can think about, again, my 3 qubits, here my system. One of them I will be preparing in the identity, and the other will be preparing the superposition here. And now I have this conditional swap operation. So every time my third qubit is in state 1, I will swap the states between qubit 1 and qubit 2. So this is also implementing depolarizing map, okay? This gate is also called the Fredkin gate. If I count now the CNOT gates, okay, this is not so clear from these pictures, but this is a CNOT gate, okay? But I can decompose this controlled Y gate into a CNOT gate and single qubit gates, okay? This is what I'm doing. I'm not doing this, but I will tell you the result. And also that Fredkin gates, there are many different ways how to decompose it into CNOT gates and single qubit gates. So I hope okay, I think this is the best result we could find about this decomposing of the C-swap gate. But then we count now the number of CNOT gates that we need in one representation and in the other, it's completely different. Or if we just look to the secret depth, so how many layers of gates I have in one secret, it's also completely different. So which is kind of strange because you think, wow, you're just implementing the same channel. It's true, we are just implementing the same channel. But just changing the representation is, at the end, is changing how many CNOT gates I will need or changing the circuit. So you can ask me, but well, what is the difference? Why are you talking about CNOT gates? Because the single qubit gates, they are not so difficult to do. The CNOT gate, they are more difficult. Usually the error in related to the CNOT gate is worse than the error related to the single gate. So when we are talking about costs, we are usually counting CNOTs, or we are counting the number of qubits. In this case, they are equal, or we are also looking to the circuit depth. There are other figures of merits, but these are like the most basic ones. Or we are also looking to the circuit depth, or like how many layers of gates I have. Because all these things, they are a problem for the NISQ devices, okay?
Can I ask a
Cool.
quick question?
Yeah, sure.
Especially since you're using NISC devices, you would probably want to do as much of the computation classically as possible. So another representation would be to just use a classical random number generator to generate with probability p 1 minus p, and then either just do a regular swap or not. And a regular swap would have 3 C0s, so that would be much better.
Yeah, this is a very good question because it's related to the strategies that I will show you now. But
Okay.
Okay, I was interested to understand what I can do just with a quantum computer, and inside a quantum computer, compare different strategies, okay?
Sure.
But I agree with you. Like, if I can avoid quantum computers, maybe it will be better than just to try to do everything in a quantum computer. But if you think about just doing everything, imagine you really want to prepare this final state because you will apply it for some other thing. Then I want just to use a quantum computer for all this strategy, okay? But I will talk a little bit about this, and I hope to convince you that what I'm comparing is fair. Like, I'm not really thinking about classical computation, okay? But you are right. Like, if you want the most efficient thing, you will probably have a hybrid strategy. So then the general question is, given a CPT map, represented by a set of these cross operators, how can we represent direction through unitaries in the most efficient way possible? So this is the question. It's not, I'm not answering this question because here I have written the most efficient way possible. We haven't proved that we have the most efficient way possible, okay? I think this is very, like, this would be a very mathematical thing. That's not what we are doing. We are doing just, we are analyzing different strategies, and we are showing that in practice, one strategy can be more efficient than another, but it will also depend what is your problem. If your problem is having many qubits, then one strategy is better. If your problem is having like very big circuits, then the other strategy is better, okay? So the most efficient is is not really what we are looking at here. But we are thinking about efficiency. So we cannot have very many qubits or a very huge circuit, okay? It doesn't make sense. So, okay, what is the most common strategy when we have cross operators and we want to implement it using a unitary operator? It's just what we know, what we study like in common quantum mechanics courses is Stein-spring dilation. So I have my system, I have this other part, which I'm calling environment, and then I have this unitary, which is living in this large Hilbert space, and then tracing out of the degrees of freedom of the environment, I can construct or can take the cross operators. Okay, so there is always a way, there is always some unitary that will do this job. In terms of circuit, I can represent this. Okay, I have NS is the number of qubits that I have in my environment. NS the number of qubits that I have, NS the number of qubits I have in the system, and then NN the number of qubits that I have in my environment. I'm always assuming I have qubits, okay? Many, I don't know, n qubits. And then what the U is doing is just applying MK for each EK state. One way to construct this unitary is just to think that in the first column, I just have all the cross operators, okay? So if we do this, we will see that we will be, this U, we will just doing this operation that we need here. This is nice. In one way, this is nice because I'm just worried about this first column. Then I can complete the rest just in a way that the operator is still unitary, okay? But the thing that's not so good is that it's a really big matrix. So if my Hilbert space is very big, I will have many cross operators, and then this unitary will be huge. So maybe it won't be so practical to implement it. So just for us to have this figure of merits in mind, the total number of qubits will be It depends on the dimension of the system and also on the number of the total number of the cross operators. Okay, the small m is just the total number of cross operators. And the synapse count. Okay, here I put synapse count and that together because I'm just looking. This is very common in quantum computation. They just look to this upper bounds on asymptotic upper bounds, which they call this big O notation. And usually you get the worst result, and then you consider, okay, C naught and that will be the same. But it's not, okay? I can have C naughts in parallel, and this will be one layer, just that one. Or I can have C naughts like this. It will make a difference. They are not necessarily the same, but here I put it together. But if you just think that the first column is the one that is making a difference in my calculation, the rest, when I'm tracing out the degrees of freedom of the environment, they are just disappearing. So what is counting is just this column, which is the size of m times d squared. In fact, the dimension, because one dimension is d times d, but here I have m times d, okay? That's why it's m times d squared. So, and then I'm able to show you the dimension of the matrix is giving me this upper bound, or the big O's depending on this parameter. Okay, this is for the Einstein spring. Another strategy to simulate, to put cross operator into unitaries is using the Zinaghi dilation. This was something I didn't know, so I just learned from this paper from 2020 from Kais. But this is a very old result, okay? This is the original result. And what Zinaghi is showing is that I can always construct a unitary that is related to one cross operator. So before, I have a unitary that's connected to all cross operators. Here, I'm just thinking about one cross operators and one unitary, okay? And what they are showing is that I need just one qubit, okay? This is just NK is acting on the space of the system, and my auxiliary system is just one qubit. And if I construct this unitary, and imagine that I start with my initial state, so my auxiliary system is preparing the qubit 0, and my initial state is just psi initial. And then if I act with this guy on the initial state, I will see that I have this, okay, 0 MK psi initial, plus I have this part here too, okay? So what I will have to do, I will have to do a measurement on the first qubit on the auxiliary system. And when I have the result 0, I have exactly the action of the cross operator that I wanted. If I have the result 1, I just throw it away. This is not what I want. So this is why this is a probabilistic strategy, which is different from Stein spring. Stein spring is always doing the map that I want. Okay, the circuit is just represented like this. So after the measurement, I will have the state which is connected to one of the cross operators, and this with some probability of success. So you see, this is similar to what Matt was saying. I can do part of it in a quantum computer, have a result, do it for different cross operators, and then I combine it classically. What I will have the results for each cross operator, I will have a result, and then I can combine classically the results. And I know this is the result that would be if I had just an initial complete with the action of all the cross operators, okay? This is nice, yes, you can do it. Many people are doing this. Another question that we have to answer, or that's connected to what we will be doing, is how we can implement this U, because here I will be implementing this U, doing something like where this part doesn't really matter. Here I have the whole complete U, which is smaller, but I will have to implement it. And one strategy is to use this exploring single value decomposition. which they show in this paper here, where I will then decompose the cross operator with the single value decomposition. And they show that, okay, the U related to the cross operator can be implemented in a sequence like this. Okay. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, so at least comparing the two quote unquote methods, the Stein Spring one and Zinagi one, it seems, at least if I got things correctly, it seems that you cannot do the Zinagi one in a single shot computation, right? Because you have to accrue statistics. So, and with the Stein Spring, you can do single shot stuff, right? So that's kind of a pain in the neck if you want to generate like state by state, or you want to protect the state out of your computation with the Zinagi, or just doing like statistics, right?
Yeah,
have like to
maybe
generate an infinite amount of samples.
Yeah, here, because, okay, if I use the Zinagi with this decomposing using the single value decomposition, what we have is that the C0 counts will be D squared, which is smaller than M times D squared. Sure. But as you said, this is a probabilistic strategy. So I'll have to do this 1 over PS, okay? So at the end, it's hard to say what is the best strategy just looking to these numbers. Because one, you will have to repeat the secret many times. And not only repeat the secret many times, you have to do many secrets, because you have to do for each cross operator, you have to do this many times. But okay, you can consider you can do in parallel, so it will just run it once. I mean, many times, all the secrets. So, but you are right, yeah.
Thank you.
And okay, then our question was, is there a, okay, then it's nice to have this Zinagi approach, and people are using it like in chemistry, quantum chemistry, and it's really like more efficient than just doing Stein Spring. Usually they prefer to do Zinagi than to use Stein Spring, okay? But we wanted to understand if there is something different. And going back to that depolarizing map, that just changing the way you're representing can change things. So we thought, okay, what happens if you want to implement Zinagi in one circuit? Just think about combining Zinagi in one circuit. Is there an efficient way to do it? So then we went to this another strategy, which is called divide and conquer strategy, which was a result from Ade Newton, my collaborator. And what they are proposing here is to use this strategy for preparing states. So why is this called divide and conquer? Imagine you have a huge circuit for preparing your state. But instead of having these huge circuits, like with many gates, you will use more qubits and make your circuit smaller. Okay, so here, this is the strategy they are exploring here. They are that's why it's called divide and conquer, because you are kind of dividing your circuit. So your circuit is smaller, but you need more qubits. And they show this is like, depending on what you're doing, this is more advantage than just doing the whole big circuit. Okay, so how are they doing this? So imagine I have 3 qubits. The first one preparing state row 1, the second preparing state row 2, and the third preparing this plus state. And then I will apply this conditional swap operation, which will do, okay, don't have to go into the details, but what I see is that if I trace out the second and the third qubit, my first qubit will be at the end preparing this superposition of row 1 and row 2. So I have prepared the initial qubit in row 1, the second in state row 2, but at the end I have the first qubit in row 1 plus row 2. So this for preparing states when I want like a superposition of many components, this is very good. So I just have many qubits, and I will have the final first qubit in this superposition of all the components that I want. Okay? So we thought, interesting. I think we can apply this for Zinagi, because instead of having row 1 and row 2, now I will be preparing my first part in Psi1 state. and the second part in psi2 state. And then I will use the same strategy for this conditional swapping in a way that the first part will be preparing this superposition. But notice here that I don't have only, imagine, this example is just for two cross operators, okay? Imaginary dynamics just have two cross operators. The dephasing map, for example, is the one case of where I have just two cross operators. So here I still have this garbage here, which I don't want. So I still have to do this measurement on the auxiliary qubits to have the cross map or the whole map that I want, okay? So I will be projecting this whole thing in state 0, and then I will have the dynamics that I want, okay? And of course, this is with some probability. It will depend on the number of, no, it will always be 1/2 because I will always project the 0 on 0 state, okay? So now I'm just having Zinagi, using this conditional swapping, and then measuring, and then I will have the whole channel, and I'm doing this just in one circuit. I'm not, so this kind of, we call this Zinagi and divide and conquer, or mixed strategy, and okay. Another strategy is to group the cross operators. It's kind of an intermediate strategy between Steinspring and Zinagi. So imagine I have a group of cross operators, and I will group them, and I will call this a new cross operator. What do I mean here? I will also give an example. Imagine you have 4 cross operators, and you arrange it in groups of 2. So M1, the new cross operator M1 is formed. It's kind of similar to Steinspring, but I'm not putting everybody in this first column. I'm just putting 2. And then in the second, I put in the rest. And of course, I need another cross operator in a way that the sum of MK Daga and K is equal to identity, okay? So this is how I'm completing the set. And if I do this strategy, I will have something intermediate between like Steinspring or Zinagi, just doing for each cross operator one circuit and then doing the swappings to combine the states. And then, okay, we can find some costs for this intermediate strategy. I won't go really into details, but you see that most of the times before I had M, and now I have L, because L will be the number of the grouping, okay? I want to show you some results, and then I want to convince you that, okay, it's interesting to have different strategies. I don't know if I will be able to convince you, oh, this is the best strategy. I don't think so, because it will really depend what you want to do. So here we have calculated what will be the cost if we have 2 qubits and 16 cross operators. So the first strategy is Zinagi combined with this divide and conquer. And the second one, when I have Zinagi, is with grouping of 2 cross operators. And then the last one is just Steinspring, okay? So you see, Steinspring needs a few qubits, because our strategy, you will need always these swappings, conditional swapping, so we will need more qubits. That's why the divide and conquer, we increase the number of qubits, but our secrets, they are smaller. And you can see the depth of the secret is 69 in this case, but I have many more qubits. So it depends on your machine, what you really like. No, for me, it's very easy. I have 100 qubits. So then it will be better just to use the first strategy, because you will need less gates. Comparing the CNOTs, so usually the Zinagi strategy with divide and conquer is worse, because I will need the C-swap always for the divide and conquer. That's why if you see, just comparing CNOTs is not very advantageous, okay? But the CNOTs, they are kind of in parallel. That's why the depth is smaller, than the much smaller than the number of CNOTs. Okay, because the depth is just one layer of gate, one other layer of gate. So it can be that the CNOTs, they are all parallel. Okay. If I go to 3 qubits, then again, I see a huge difference between the number of qubits. But look to the difference of the depth. This is completely impractical. I don't have computers nowadays implementing 800 qubits, 8,000 qubits, 8,000 gates. Okay, so forget about it. Here, like time spring is, I would be able to do it. So for the first strategy, maybe I can even go to less, like 300 qubits. So that's why it really depends on what you have, okay? But what I want to convince you is exactly, it's similar to what I was saying about the depolarizing map. It's just changing these representations will change the costs that we need. And this is interesting because we're still struggling how to implement these things in like these devices. Just to compare it, here I have like 2 qubits and I'm grouping in different ways because here I was just talking about 2 qubits and grouping in 1 and 2. Here I'm grouping 1, 2, 4, 8, 6, 16. So the yellow line is time spring, the depth, and the black line is the CNOT count. So we see that, okay, depending how I'm grouping, the depth will be much better than its time spring. Okay, so these guys here are much better. Here, this is the worst strategy, which is kind of trying to do time spring in this Zinagi combined divide and conquer strategy, which it doesn't make sense. So yeah, that's why like this is the strategy that we want to do. Okay, so probably we will stay in something, I don't know, in between here. But just for us to have an idea how these things change. So we have then used this strategy to simulate this process that is related to the photosynthesis and is related to this Feta-Matthews-Olson complex, which is how light is transferred inside the cell. I won't go into the details because I don't really understand all these things. But what we see is that what they're showing in this paper is that we have, okay, there is a huge debate if this process is really quantum or not, because what we see is that it's a very efficient process of energy transfer, but we don't really know if we really need to describe it in a quantum way. Okay, some people say, yes, we need coherence. Some people say, oh, no, we can describe it classically. But what I know, what I understood from the things that I read, but okay, I'm still learning all these things, is that we can describe it in a quantum way, okay? And that's what they are showing. So here, you can think about this as a molecule, and this molecule have different parts, which is this part here. They are kind of parts of the molecule, okay? And the light can go through many different ways. And this is one possible way. And that's what they are showing here, the cross operators that are related to these dynamics when I have kind of a ground state, and here I have a sink state. So the light is going here and going through this path. So here I have then the cross operators related to this. Also this alpha and delta T, they are getting from the real thing. What are these numbers? And I'm not really even showing here, but they are kind of a fixed numbers, okay? And so we wanted to implement these cross operators, but at the end we didn't have access to a very good quantum machine. So what we decided to do, but this is something we still can improve, is just to work with a subspace So we wanted to simulate the dynamics of this part. So, we thinking about the whole thing about like this 5-level sync 1, 2, 3 and ground state 1, 2, 3 sync state. So if you just want to implement this number of Krauss operators, we have here.
Can I ask a question
again,
about that? Can I ask a question? Can you go back to your model again?
Here.
Yes. So why are you only having some of the Krauss operators? So for example, the 4-4 element is missing, some of the coherences are missing. So why do you choose only these subset?
Yeah. Okay, this is something they have chosen, motivated by the biological model, which I don't know the details, okay? So I don't know. But I know that they are motivated about the biological model, so it makes sense to have just these projectors and these jump operators.
Okay.
More or less, you have just projectors and jump operators between 0, the ground state, and the states inside the cell, and the final site and the sync state. But why exactly? They have Greenblatt equations. They show like from some Hamiltonian they can prove this. Okay.
Okay.
I'm not. Yeah. I don't know the details either. Really, I don't know how to explain this, but I know they know. So this paper they have the details of it, but they really have a Greenblatt equation and they get these Krauss operators. So if you just want to implement this, these are the numbers. So it depends. If you want to do this with 6 qubits, then you can do Stein spring if you have this possibility of implementing this, that. So we didn't have so many qubits and also not such a could implement so many gates. This is what I was saying. We didn't have access to a very good quantum computer. So at the end, what we were deciding to do is just to work in a smaller subspace. We were just working here. So we were neglecting the Krauss operators that are not related to this part. And then if we start my initial state in this way, and then we were reproducing the dynamics, and this was done in this IBM Kevin computer, which is a kind of, I think it's not even available anymore. It's really a bad computer. But it was for free and we could access it. So we see that in orange is expected probability, and in blue is our results. So it's quite good what we were doing. It were possible to do it, and we could just reproduce the results. So this is just to convince you a little bit that the strategy is useful. Okay. So yeah, this part I think is more like motivating a little bit. The strategy is not really, oh, wow, it's much better. We have good improvements. No, I think what I want to convince you is that we have a different strategy, and this will make a difference when you, depending on what you want to do. Okay. So then just concluding, we developed efficient quantum algorithms to simulate open quantum system on each device. We developed a grouping framework. So like this grouping Krauss operators, which is something like in between Stein spring and Zinagi. And we demonstrate a practical utility of this technique by simulating the complex FMO photosynthesis in a real quantum processor. Okay, thank you. Just before I end, and before I forget, I have this small advertisement. I'm editing together with Francesco Petruccioni this special issue on open quantum systems applied to quantum computation. So yeah, I invite you to send your papers there. We are kind of covering dissipative quantum computation, simulating open quantum systems on quantum computers, and yeah, different things that you can do with quantum computers, open quantum systems, and quantum computation. Okay, yeah, that's all. I'm not hearing you. The class.
Yeah, I think that we have plenty of time for questions. If you have questions from the audience, from the screen, Matt is doing a Hermione here.
You go back to the bar graph where you show the numbers for the depth and C knots for various groupings, but that was before the case study.
Here?
No, before the case study, there was a bar graph.
Ah.
Oh, that one, yeah. One slide further. The graph, no, that one, yeah, okay, this is it. So looking at this, it looks like, and this might be just an artifact of these particular numbers, but it looks like when the group size is something like the square root of the dimension, is when you get a transition between, you know, the C naught, well, it's where you get, I actually forget that because I'm confusing two things. But let me
No,
ask,
but
let me ask the question
probably,
in generality.
if you look here, you can get what you want. I agree with you. There is probably there is a point where you know it's better to do this than do that. If you have the L and
I mean,
because
there's points where obviously there's points where it's just worse than the Steinspring dilation. So once you have a group size of 8, you're not getting any benefit whatsoever. So how do you, is there any sort of analytic bound on where that point is going to be? Like, you know, that you need the group size to be smaller than a certain amount.
yeah, this is something when we were doing the experiments, we checked, and it's true. Like usually denagging works better when I'm not doing these huge groupings. I'm just doing smaller groupings, okay? But I would say that from this results, you can get this point, but I'm not sure. We haven't checked it, okay? But probably. But it's difficult because these are all upper, like asymptotic upper bounds.
Yeah, sure.
So we will be comparing asymptotic upper bounds. Well, maybe you can get some idea. I don't know if you will get precisely analytically saying, okay, this is the point, okay?
Yeah, Nadja, okay. Used like you count the C naught and counted the depth of your circuit and so on and so forth. But did you try to use, because I think that these are proxies for other figures of merit, right? For the error that you have in your quantum computation. So did you try to calculate like the actual error instead of counting gates and counting C naughts?
No, because there is also another problem that we are not mentioning, is connectivity, which is a huge connectivity. Like I'm always assuming that I can connect the qubit 1 with qubit 2, qubit 2 with qubit 3, and qubit 3 with qubit 1 in the same way. And this is not true. Most quantum computers, they don't have this. You can connect some qubits, another set of qubits, another set of qubits. You don't have this whole connectivity.
I see.
So that's why when we implement these things, the results are even like different from what we were expecting. So we haven't, no, we don't, I haven't done this like getting one machine and thinking about the errors, but I know that if I do this, connectivity will have to be taken into account also, because this is also something very important for NISC devices.
Cool. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, there is Andrew.
So when you're giving these counts of how many circuits, how many qubits, and so on, some of the strategies you were mentioning are the probabilistic ones, the post-selected strategies. And so I'm wondering how you also incorporate the fact that this takes a certain number of times before it succeeds. So can you kind of weight your numbers you give with this probability of success, something like this?
Yeah, we are not doing it. We just have the probability of success. But if you want really to have the most, like the best comparison, you will have to do it to include this. But we are not doing it.
Okay.
Okay.
I have a second question. Thanks for the answer. The second question is, I think Matt was mentioning at the beginning of the seminar that another way of preparing some mixed state, so you can implement these Krauss maps, But there's another way of doing it, which is, suppose you have two parties and one party can randomly prepare some set of pure states with the correct probabilities, and the other party won't be able to statistically tell the difference between that collection of pure states and the desired mixed state. And so I'm wondering if you could use that strategy to maybe more efficiently prepare a mixed state from the point of view of one observer. So you have the person that's running the quantum computer sometimes prepare this pure state, sometimes prepare that pure state, and so on. But then if you do an ensemble average from the point of view of the measure, say, of the computer, does that give any kind of other alternative or other way of preparing the state that gives some advantages in terms of computational resources?
Yeah, okay. I think, okay, I don't know the answer, but I think this is a kind of it's interesting strategy, but usually it's not the way like people from computer science are thinking, because they want at the end to have this state prepared in the quantum computer because they will use this for some other thing, okay? So they need to know how to prepare. So if I just do it classically, I'll have kind of receipt, but I won't have the qubit prepared. I'm not sure if I'm being clear about my point of view, but it's like kind of, it's a different thing about doing it classically and having kind of a table of results and having really the thing prepared in the state that I want. Do you agree?
So I guess this is a foundational questions point of view about
Yeah.
what a mixed state is.
Yeah.
Because you can say a mixed state is not something that exists in a Platonic thing. It's some statistical description that you can only access through repeated measurements of that quantity.
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, it's funny because many people, they ask me this question and I still don't have the proper answer. So, but I think we have it's a different thing when in practice. Of course, yeah, I agree. Like, what is a state? But if I want to imagine my circuit that I will use is using these strategies of some variational circuit. So it has some three parameters that I will optimize through this quantum computing process, okay? So I cannot only, I will use some machine learning optimization process to I don't know, descendant gradient to optimize this parameter, and I will just update my circuit each time I do it. So if I just do all the things classically, it's a different thing. At least this is the way I see it. Theoretically, no, they can be, the description is similar, but in practice, it will be different. So if I just have something fixed, okay. But if I have something that I will have to be updating, this is for me at least like the way I see it. So if I will use all these strategies that, imagine I have some advantage of doing quantum computation, okay? Then, and I will do this, some parameter that is like changing in time in this circuit. Then I don't know, I don't see how I can do everything classically, and then I use this later to like feed my circuit.
Yeah, it might be the case that everything like boils down to this difference between like proper and improper mixture and things like that you're alluding to. But one major difference that I also alluded to during Nadja's seminar is that if you want to do like protocols of quantum communication, a single shot regime, your strategy of doing like this crude statistics is not going to work because you have like to repeat the experiment many times. You're not like single shotting like photons, whatever, right? So I know the state is a mathematical abstraction, but I want to single shot this stuff and not doing like a repeat of this measurement. So in this regime, it's gonna work, but maybe.
So my counter argument would be single shot has no sense when you have a mixed state.
I mean,
Yeah,
also apart from the Steinspring case, it's not single shot, right? Because you have this post-selection. So the only case.
No, you don't have to post-select in Steinspring. You have like to trace out.
Trace out, yeah.
Yeah. In any of the strategies.
Yeah.
In any of the new strategies discussed here, there's already.
That's why I'm for Steinspring. No, I'm yeah.
So.
Yeah, but you're correct. Yeah.
I mean, there's no reason why the classical stuff can't be internal. I mean, in fact, in a real quantum computer, you have control circuitry and you have
Mhm.
the actual quantum computer. And these two things interact with each other via algorithms, right? So, and there's no reason why you can't have, feedback and feed forward between the two. I mean, it may be more difficult in certain circumstances, but people study this kind of thing. So I'm sort of failing to see the difference, because it's just a question of, do I have my system interacting with qubits, or do I have my system interacting with classical bits? And
Mhm.
okay, the circuitry will be a bit different, but I'm kind of struggling to see the sort of theoretical basis for you know thinking that there's a real difference here. Sure, maybe I'm missing something.
Oh, sure, yeah. More questions? Let me see if I have some questions from the audience. I don't think so, because Zoom is smart.
Chat room. No, there's nothing there.
Yeah, so in this case, let's thank Nadja again. Obrigado, Nadja. Yeah, so
Okay.
next week with Ranieri Neri from IQF, from Barcelona. He's gonna talk like device-dependent strategies for whatever. That's Tony Assin's thing. So yeah, Nadja, thank you very much. And
Thank you. See
thank
you. Bye.
bye-bye.
Thank you.